The ship that carried humanity's hopes was ugly. There was no other word for it. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the observation window of the transport vessel and looked at the Perseverance Times as it floated beside them. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals. Some parts were gray, some were dark brown, and some had a strange green color from the copper alloys used in its construction. The engines looked like they had been bolted on as an afterthought. The whole thing was barely 200 meters long. Elena took a deep breath. This was it. This was what humanity had to offer. "She's not much to look at," said Marcus Cole, stepping up beside her. He was the chief engineer who had spent 4 years building this vessel. His hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes had dark circles under them from too many sleepless nights. "But she's got it where it counts. The Corvathons won't care about what's inside," Elena said. "They'll see the outside and laugh. Let them laugh." Elena turned to look at him. Marcus had a strange smile on his face. It was the smile of a man who knew something that others did not. "You seem confident," she said. "I am." He tapped the window with his finger, pointing at the ugly little ship. "They've never seen anything like her. They don't know what she can do, and by the time they figure it out, it'll be too late." Elena wished she shared his confidence. In 3 hours, they would arrive at Axion Prime, the capital world of the Corvathan Empire. The Corvathans had ruled 1,000 star systems for 40,000 years. They had technology that humans could barely understand. Their smallest patrol ships were larger than the Perseverance Asterisk. Their warships stretched for kilometers, powered by captured black holes. And humanity? Humanity had been discovered only 15 years ago. A Corvathan scout ship had stumbled upon Earth's first interstellar probe and followed its signal back to the solar system. The Corvathans had studied humanity for a few years, then made contact. They classified humans as a Category 7 primitive species, the lowest rank possible for a spacefaring civilization. Now, humanity had been granted permission to present at the Grand Exhibition. It was a chance to prove themselves, to show that they deserved a higher place in the galactic order. Every species that wanted to rise in the Empire's hierarchy had to demonstrate their worth at the exhibition. Elena knew what was at stake. If they failed here, humanity would remain at the bottom forever. They would be laborers, servants, the species that other species looked down upon. But if they succeeded, she didn't let herself think about success. Not yet. The transport ship entered the Axion system, and Elena got her first look at the Corvathan homeworld. It was enormous, 3 times the size of Earth, wrapped in layers of artificial structures that extended from the surface into orbit. Massive stations floated around it like satellites, each one larger than Earth's moon. Ships of every size and shape moved through the space around it. Thousands of them, maybe millions, and in the center of it all was the grand demonstration arena. It was a structure so large that Elena's mind struggled to understand it. It was shaped like a ring, but the ring was the size of a small planet. Inside the ring was empty space where demonstrations took place. Around the ring were viewing platforms that could hold billions of spectators. "My God," Elena whispered. "Yeah," Marcus said. "They like to show off." Their transport was guided to a docking port on one of the smaller platforms. A group of Corvathan officials was waiting for them when they disembarked. The Corvathans were tall over 3 meters with long, thin bodies covered in silver scales. Their eyes were large and black, with no visible pupils. They moved with a strange grace, like dancers or snakes. The leader of the group stepped forward and looked down at Elena with an expression she could not read. "Ambassador Vasquez," the Corvathan said. Its voice was deep and resonant, translated through a device on its chest. "I am Coordinator Thesix. I will oversee your presentation." "Thank you, Coordinator," Elena said, keeping her voice steady. "We are honored to be here." Thesix's head tilted slightly. "You should be. It is rare for a Category 7 species to be granted this opportunity." The High Council debated for many cycles before allowing it. Some argued that it was a waste of time. "We hope to change their minds. That remains to be seen." Thesix turned and gestured for them to follow. "Your vessel has been brought to the preparation bay. You have 6 hours before your presentation. The High Council will be watching, along with representatives from across the Empire." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were made of some kind of dark metal that absorbed light. Corvathans and other species moved past them, all of them glancing at the humans with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Elena noticed the other species watching them. She saw creatures with multiple limbs, creatures covered in fur, creatures that floated instead of walking. All of them had one thing in common. They looked at the humans like they were insects. They reached the preparation bay, and Elena saw the Perseverance sitting in the middle of the vast space. Around it were other vessels being prepared for the exhibition. Each one was sleek and beautiful, designed with obvious care. They had smooth hulls that gleamed under the lights. They had elegant weapon systems and powerful engines. And then there was the Perseverance asterisk. It looked like a child's toy next to the others. A group of Corvathan engineers was standing near it, examining it with instruments. As Elena and Marcus approached, she heard them talking. Look at the hull composition. It's not even uniform. They used at least 6 different alloys, and the engine design. It's a basic fusion system. My species stopped using those 10,000 years ago. How did they even get here? This thing looks like it would fall apart in a gravity well. One of them noticed the humans approaching and said something to the others. They all turned and stared, and Elena saw the amusement in their black eyes. Is this your vessel? One of them asked. Yes, Marcus said. She's called the Perseverance asterisk. The Corvathan made a sound that might have been laughter. A fitting name. It must take great perseverance to fly something so primitive. The other engineers joined in the laughter. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Elena stepped forward. We appreciate your interest in our vessel. We look forward to demonstrating its capabilities. I'm sure you do. The lead engineer looked at the Perseverance with open contempt. I'm sure it has many capabilities. More laughter. Elena felt her face growing hot, but she kept her expression neutral. She had prepared for this. She had known they would be mocked. The hours passed slowly. Elena and Marcus stayed near the Perseverance asterisk, making final preparations. They ran diagnostic checks on all systems. They reviewed the demonstration plan again and again. They tried to ignore the looks and the whispered comments from the other species. Finally, the time came. The Perseverance was moved to a launch bay that opened into the arena. Elena stood in the control room of the viewing platform, watching through a massive window. Below her, the arena stretched out in all directions, an empty space large enough to hold entire fleets. The viewing platforms were filling up. Elena saw Corvathans and dozens of other species taking their seats. Above them all, on a platform that floated higher than the rest, sat the High Council. There were 12 of them, the oldest and most powerful Corvathans in the Empire. They had ruled for thousands of years, making decisions that affected trillions of lives. In the center of them sat High Arbiter Zethron, the supreme leader of the Corvathan Empire. Zethron was ancient. His scales had faded from silver to a dull gray. His body was bent with age, but his eyes were sharp and cold. And when he looked toward the human vessel, Elena felt a chill run down her spine. A voice echoed through the arena, announcing the beginning of the exhibition. The first species to present was called the Threll, a race of insectoid beings known for their manufacturing abilities. They showcased a massive construction vessel that could build space stations in a matter of days. The council watched with polite interest. When the demonstration ended, they gave a small nod of approval, and the Threll left with satisfied expressions. More species followed. Each one had something impressive to show. Advanced weapon systems, medical technologies that could cure any disease, propulsion systems that could cross the galaxy in weeks. The council watched them all, occasionally making notes, occasionally asking questions. Then it was humanity's turn. The Perseverance moved into the arena. On the viewing platforms, Elena heard the reactions begin immediately. Laughter. It started small, a few chuckles from the nearest platforms. Then it grew. Soon, the entire arena was filled with the sound of alien laughter. Species that had never agreed on anything in their history were united in their amusement at the primitive human vessel. Elena looked up at the High Council. Most of them were smiling, if their expressions could be called smiles. But Zethron was not laughing. He was watching the Perseverance with those cold, calculating eyes. Coordinator Thessix's voice came through the communication system. The human delegation will now present their vessel. Ambassador Vasquez, you may begin. Elena took a deep breath and activated her microphone. Her voice echoed across the arena. Members of the High Council, honored representatives, thank you for this opportunity. Humanity is a young species. We have only been traveling among the stars for a short time. We do not have ancient technologies or vast resources. What we have is determination, creativity, and the will to survive. She gestured toward the Time's Perseverance asterisk. This vessel represents everything we are. It was built from the materials we had available. It was designed by engineers who had never seen alien technology. It may not look like much, but we believe it demonstrates humanity's potential. Silence. Then more laughter. A voice called out from one of the platforms. Potential for what? Being a cargo hauler? More laughter. Elena waited for it to die down. Then she continued. We request permission to conduct a live demonstration. We believe actions speak louder than words. She looked up at the High Council. Zethron was leaning forward slightly, his eyes still fixed on the human vessel. After a long moment, he spoke. Very well, Ambassador. You may demonstrate your vessel's capabilities. His voice was cold and precise, each word carefully chosen. Coordinator Thesix, prepare a standard combat trial. Thesix's voice responded. Yes, High Arbiter. We will deploy 6 shielded target drones across a field of 50,000 kilometers. The human vessel will have 1 standard cycle to destroy them all. Elena's heart sank. 1 standard cycle was approximately 2 hours in human time, and shielded drones were designed to withstand attacks from advanced warships. She had seen other species fail to destroy even 1 drone in their demonstrations, but Marcus was smiling. He leaned over to speak into her ear. Perfect. Perfect? Marcus, those drones have shields that can stop antimatter weapons. I know. His smile grew wider. Tell them we'll do it in under 5 minutes. Elena stared at him. What? Trust me. She looked at her chief engineer for a long moment. She saw the certainty in his eyes. She thought about the 4 years he had spent building the Times Perseverance asterisk, the sleepless nights, the secrets he had hinted at but never fully explained. She turned back to her microphone. High Arbiter, we accept the trial, and we request that the time be reduced to 5 minutes. Silence fell across the arena. Even the laughter stopped. The spectators looked at each other in confusion. 5 minutes? It was impossible. It was insane. Up on the council platform, Zethron leaned back in his seat. For the first time, something like interest flickered in his eyes. You request 5 minutes, he said slowly. Yes, High Arbiter. And if you fail? Elena hesitated. Then we will accept whatever judgment the council sees fit. A long pause. Then Zethron made a gesture with one of his long fingers. Granted. Deploy the drones. The arena's systems hummed to life. 6 drones shot out from launch ports around the ring, speeding away in different directions until they were scattered across the vast proving ground. Their shields activated, glowing with a faint blue light. Coordinator Thesix's voice echoed once more. The trial will begin in 30 seconds. Human vessel, prepare for combat. Elena watched the Times Perseverance Times drift into position in the center of the arena. It looked so small, so fragile. Marcus, she said quietly. What did you build? He didn't answer. He was watching the ship with an expression she had never seen before. Pride. Fierce, burning pride. Begin, Thesix announced. The Times Perseverance Times moved. It didn't move gracefully, it lurched forward, its engines flaring unevenly. More laughter came from the platforms. Then something changed. The ship's hull began to shift. Panels slid aside, revealing systems that had been hidden beneath the ugly exterior. Weapons ports opened. Sensor arrays extended. The whole vessel seemed to unfold like a flower blooming, and a voice echoed across the arena, not Elena's voice, not Marcus's voice, but something else entirely. It was calm and mechanical, yet somehow alive. Owen. Online. Engaging tactical analysis. Targets acquired. Elena turned to Marcus. What is Owen? Offensive Warfare Engagement Network, Marcus said. Our secret weapon. An artificial intelligence designed for one purpose. Winning fights against superior enemies. An AI? Marcus, the Corvathans banned AI warfare systems thousands of years ago. They banned them because they were afraid of them. Marcus's eyes never left the Times. Perseverance asterisk. They've never seen an AI like Owen. None of them have. Because Owen wasn't built from alien technology. Owen was built from human experience. Thousands of years of humans fighting each other. Every war, every battle, every strategy ever devised. Owen learned from all of it. On the arena floor, the Perseverance fired, but it didn't fire ordinary weapons. Strange projectiles launched from its hull, tungsten rods that changed direction mid-flight, adjusting their trajectory as they went. At the same time, clouds of tiny drones erupted from the ship, spreading across the arena in coordinated swarms. The first target drone detected the incoming weapons and activated its defensive systems. Its shields flared, ready to absorb the impact. The tungsten rods hit the shield and passed through. The drone exploded. Across the arena, spectators gasped. The shields on those drones were supposed to be impenetrable. Nothing should have been able to pass through them. Shield harmonic inversion, Marcus said softly. Owen analyzed the shield frequency in real time and adjusted the projectiles to phase through. It took about 3 seconds. 2 more drones exploded in quick succession. The swarm drones had reached them, and instead of attacking the shields directly, they had burrowed into the small gaps where the shield emitters connected. They were inside the shields now, detonating against the vulnerable hull. The 4th drone tried to run. Its engines flared as it attempted to escape into the asteroid field at the edge of the arena. The Perseverance pursued, but it didn't chase the drone directly. It predicted where the drone would go. Owen calculated the drone's most likely escape route in milliseconds and sent a volley of weapons to intercept. Another explosion. Elena looked at the clock. 90 seconds had passed. The 5th and 6th drones were the furthest away, almost at the edge of the arena. They were trying to use the asteroids for cover, hiding behind massive rocks to block incoming fire. Owen adapted. The Perseverance launched a different kind of weapon, missiles that split into dozens of smaller projectiles, each one seeking a different path through the asteroid field. Some went left, some went right, some went up and around. They came at the drones from every direction at once. The 5th drone's shields flickered and failed. It exploded. The 6th drone made one last attempt to survive. It overloaded its shield generator, creating a bubble of energy so powerful that it vaporized incoming projectiles before they could reach it. Owen paused for exactly 1.4 seconds. Then the Perseverance launched something new, a single, larger projectile that didn't aim for the drone itself. It aimed for the space beside the drone. The projectile detonated, but instead of an explosion, it released a pulse of energy that disrupted the electromagnetic field around the drone. The overloaded shield generator couldn't compensate. The feedback surge destroyed it from the inside. The 6th drone exploded. Elena looked at the clock. 18 seconds. Silence filled the arena. The laughter was gone. The amusement was gone. A million spectators stared at the ugly little human ship floating in the middle of the arena, surrounded by the debris of 6 supposedly indestructible drones. Elena looked up at the High Council. The members were frozen, their black eyes wide. Some of them were turning to speak to each other in urgent, hushed tones. But Zethron was not speaking. The High Arbiter was staring at the Perseverance with an expression that Elena recognized. It was not amusement. It was not contempt. It was fear. Marcus stepped up beside her. "They're not laughing anymore." "No," Elena agreed. "They're not." She waited for the council to respond. She expected praise, or at least acknowledgement. She expected them to recognize what humanity had accomplished. Instead, Zethron rose from his seat. His voice was cold and hard when he spoke. "The demonstration is concluded. The human delegation will return to their vessel and leave Corvathon space immediately. Their performance was noted." Elena's heart sank. "High Arbiter, we request consideration for advancement in..." "Denied." Zethron turned away. "This exhibition is over. Coordinator Thesix, escort the humans from the arena." The viewing platforms began to empty. The spectators filed out in silence, still stunned by what they had witnessed. None of them looked at the humans. None of them spoke. Elena felt Marcus's hand on her arm. "We should go, but we proved ourselves. We showed them what we can do. We showed them too much." Marcus's voice was grim. "Look at Zethron. He's not impressed. He's scared. And scared rulers don't give rewards. They eliminate threats." They were escorted back to the Perseverance by armed guards. The ship's airlock sealed behind them, and they were alone. Elena slumped into a chair on the bridge. 4 years of work. 4 years. And they just threw us out. It's not over. Marcus was at a control console, his fingers moving rapidly across the interface. "Elena, you need to see this." She looked up. What? Owen intercepted something. A transmission from Zethron's platform, sent immediately after our demonstration. It's encrypted, but Owen broke it. He played the message. Zethron's voice filled the bridge, cold and merciless. The human species is hereby classified as an existential threat to the Empire. All human vessels are to be tracked and destroyed. Earth is to be sterilized. Begin immediately. No survivors. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus turned to look at her. His expression was grim, but his eyes held that same strange fire she had seen before. They were never going to let us rise, he said. No matter what we showed them, we were always going to be a threat to them. What do we do? Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Owen has already done it. The moment we intercepted that transmission, Owen relayed it to every human ship in the galaxy, every colony, every station, every vessel with a human on board. He turned back to the console. They wanted to destroy us while we were helpless. They're going to find out that we were never helpless. We were just waiting. Elena stared at him. Marcus, what have you built? He looked at the Perseverance times around them, the ugly, primitive ship that had just destroyed 6 indestructible drones in 18 seconds. I built a prototype, he said, and prototypes are meant to be copied. The Perseverance * engines came to life. The ship turned toward human space, toward Earth, toward a war that the Corvathons had just started, and on every human frequency, Owen's voice was broadcasting a single message. They are coming to destroy us. Prepare for war. The message spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Every ship, every station, every colony received Owen's transmission within hours. The intercepted order from High Arbiter Zethron played on screens and speakers throughout the solar system and beyond. Earth is to be sterilized. No survivors. On Earth, people watched in silence. In the great cities, crowds gathered in public squares, staring at massive screens that showed the transmission again and again. On Mars Colony, workers stopped their machines and listened. On the stations orbiting Jupiter, engineers and scientists put down their tools. For a long moment, humanity held its breath. Then they got to work. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of Earth Defense Command, watching reports flood in from every corner of human space. She was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had spent her life preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now it was here. What's our status? She asked. Commander Rodriguez, her second-in-command, pulled up a display. Every military vessel has been activated. We have 47 combat ships in the solar system. Another 32 spread across our colonies. The Perseverance times is en route from Corvathon space ETA 6 hours. 79 ships. Chen Wei's voice was flat. Intelligence says the Corvathons will send at least 500. 1. Yes, Admiral. And their smallest warship is 3 times the size of our largest. Yes, Admiral. Chen Wei looked at the display. It showed Earth, blue and green and beautiful, floating in the darkness of space. Billions of people lived down there. Families, children, everything humanity had ever built or dreamed or hoped for. Get me Marcus Cole, she said. An hour later, a communication link was established with the Perseverance *. Marcus Cole's face appeared on the screen, tired but alert. Behind him, Elena Vasquez was visible, speaking with members of Earth's diplomatic corps. Admiral Chen, Marcus said, I assume you've seen the transmission. The whole species has seen it, Mr. Cole. I need to know what we're working with. That demonstration at the exhibition, was it real? Marcus nodded. Every bit of it. The Perseverance times performed exactly as designed. Then I need to understand something. Chen Wei leaned forward. You built that ship in 4 years with a fraction of the resources the Corvathons have. You created an AI that can adapt in real time. Weapons that can bypass their shields. How? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. Admiral, the Corvathons have been at the top of the galactic hierarchy for 40,000 years. They've fought wars, yes, but they've never faced a real challenge. Their technology evolved slowly because they never needed it to evolve quickly. They've been coasting on their success for millennia. And us? We've been fighting each other since we climbed down from the trees. Every generation of humans has faced some kind of conflict. We've developed weapons, strategies, tactics, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. When I built Owen, I didn't just program it with combat algorithms. I fed it every war in human history, every battle, every strategy ever devised by a human mind. Sun Tzu, Alexander, Napoleon, every military thinker who ever lived. Chen Wei understood. You built an AI that thinks like a human. I built an AI that thinks like humanity. All of us. Our creativity, our adaptability, our refusal to give up even when the odds are impossible. Marcus's eyes were intense. The Corvathans don't understand what that means. They've never met a species like us. Can we win this war? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked down at something off-screen, then back at the Admiral. We can survive it. But I need to ask you something first. How fast can we build ships? Chen Wei frowned. The Times Perseverance Times took 4 years to construct. That's because we were starting from nothing. Now we have the design. We have ON. We have the manufacturing infrastructure of the entire species. Marcus pulled up a schematic on his end and shared it with the command center. I designed the Times Perseverance Times to be ugly on purpose. I used mismatched alloys and crude-looking components because I wanted it to be underestimated. But I also designed it to be simple. Any shipyard that can build a cargo hauler can build this ship. Chen Wei studied the schematic. It was elegant in its simplicity, modular components that could be mass-produced, systems that used common materials, a design philosophy that prioritized function over form. How long? She asked. With full mobilization, we can produce one ship every 72 hours. If we convert civilian manufacturing as well, we can double that. And Owen? Owen can be copied. Each ship gets its own instance, but they're all connected. They share information in real time. Every time one Owen unit learns something, they all learn it. Chen Wei turned to Rodriguez. Begin full mobilization. Every shipyard, every factory, everything that can be converted. I want this species building warships around the clock. Rodriguez nodded and began issuing orders. Chen Wei looked back at Marcus. How long until the Corvathans arrive? Based on their standard fleet protocols, they'll assemble a proper invasion force before moving. That takes time, even for them. We have maybe 3 weeks. 3 weeks to save humanity. 3 weeks to show them what we're made of. The following days were unlike anything in human history. The species that had spent centuries fighting itself turned its full attention to a common enemy. Old rivalries were forgotten. Old borders became meaningless. For the first time, humanity truly became one. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels switched to producing warships. Factories that made civilian goods began manufacturing weapons. Scientists who had been working on separate projects came together to improve the Times Perseverance Times design. On Mars, the mining colonies increased their output by 300%. The raw materials flowed to Earth orbit, where construction stations worked day and night. Workers pulled double shifts, then triple shifts. When they collapsed from exhaustion, others took their places. Elena Vasquez became the voice of humanity. She broadcast messages to the species every day, updating them on the progress, keeping their spirits up. She told them about the threat they faced, but she also told them about their strength. She reminded them of every challenge humanity had ever overcome. They call us primitive, she said in one broadcast. They laugh at our technology, but technology is not what makes a species great. What makes a species great is the will to survive, the courage to fight, the ability to adapt and overcome. These are the qualities that brought us down from the trees, out of the caves, across the oceans, and into the stars. These are the qualities that will save us now. Meanwhile, Owen was evolving. Each copy of the AI was learning, growing, becoming more sophisticated. They analyzed Corvathan technology from the data gathered during the exhibition. They studied Corvathan military tactics from historical records. They ran simulations, millions of simulations preparing for every possible scenario. And they found weaknesses. The Corvathan shields were powerful, but they had a pattern. Every shield system operated on specific frequencies, and those frequencies could be predicted and countered. Their weapons were devastating, but they were designed to fight enemies who used conventional tactics. Their ships were massive, but their size made them slow to maneuver. Owen shared this knowledge with human commanders. New strategies were developed, new weapons were designed. Marcus Cole oversaw the production of a weapon he called the harmonic inverter. It was based on the technology that had allowed the Times Perseverance times to bypass the drone shields during the exhibition, but this version was larger, more powerful, and designed to work against warship-class shields. "Will it work against a Corvathan battleship?" Chen Wei asked when she saw the prototype. "In theory, yes." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "In practice, we won't know until we try. Their ships have redundant shield systems. Even if we break through one layer, there might be others. Then we make sure we break through all of them." 2 weeks passed. Then 2.5. In the shipyards of Earth orbit, vessels were being completed at an incredible rate. They weren't beautiful ships. They looked like their parent, the Times Perseverance times ugly, patchwork, cobbled together from whatever materials were available. But they were functional. They were armed, and each one carried an Owen unit that was ready to fight. By the end of the 3rd week, humanity had built 212 warships. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Times Defiance Asterisk. It was the largest ship in the human fleet, twice the size of the Times Perseverance Asterisk, though still tiny compared to Corvathan vessels. Around her, the fleet was assembled in formation, spread across the space between Earth and Mars. "Admiral," a sensor operator called out, "we're detecting a spatial distortion at the edge of the system. Multiple signatures." Chen Wei looked at the tactical display. Points of light were appearing in the darkness of space, more and more of them with each passing second. "How many?" The operator's voice was tight with fear. 523 contacts, Admiral." Corvathan warship signatures, confirmed. 523 ships. The smallest of them was larger than the Times Defiance Asterisk. The largest were kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They had come to sterilize Earth, to wipe humanity from existence. Chen Wei opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The enemy has arrived. They outnumber us. They outgun us. They think we are primitive, weak, and easy to destroy. Today, we prove them wrong." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. They were scared. They had every right to be. But beneath the fear, she saw determination. "Remember why we fight?" she continued. "We fight for our homes, our families, our children. We fight for every human who has ever lived and every human who will ever live. The Corvathans want to erase us from history. We will not let them." Across the fleet, crews were preparing for battle, weapons systems powered up, shields activated. Owen units synchronized their targeting data, sharing information at the speed of light. The Corvathan fleet advanced. It moved in perfect formation, a wall of warships that seemed to blot out the stars. At the front was the flagship of the Purge fleet, a vessel called the Times Divine Mandate Asterisk, 3 kilometers long, commanded by Fleet Master Voran, one of the Empire's most decorated officers. Voran looked at the human fleet with contempt. His sensors showed him 200 small vessels, poorly constructed, using primitive technology. They were clustered together like frightened animals. "Pathetic," he said to his officers. "These creatures dare to oppose us? Signal the fleet. Begin the purge." The Corvathan ships opened fire. Beams of energy lanced across space, each one powerful enough to vaporize a small moon. Missiles launched by the thousands, their warheads containing antimatter that could tear through any known material. But the human fleet was no longer where the weapons were aimed. The moment the Corvathans fired, Owen had predicted their targeting solutions. The human ships scattered in a pattern that seemed chaotic, but was precisely calculated. Energy beams cut through empty space. Missiles detonated harmlessly against asteroids that had been positioned as decoys. Voran frowned. "They're faster than expected. Adjust targeting." But adjusting took time. The Corvathan fire control systems were sophisticated but rigid. They needed to recalculate, to update their solutions, to coordinate across hundreds of ships. The human fleet did not wait. They came in waves, not in the orderly formations that the Corvathans expected, but in seemingly random groups that attacked from every direction at once. Some ships went left. Some went right. Some dove under the Corvathan fleet. Some climbed above it, and they fought dirty. The first Corvathan ship to fall was a cruiser at the edge of the formation. 3 human vessels attacked it simultaneously, not with direct weapons fire, but with swarms of small drones that attached to its hull and began cutting through the armor. By the time the cruiser's crew realized what was happening, The drones had reached the reactor core. The explosion lit up the void. What was that? Voron demanded. What hit that ship? Unknown. Fleet Master. We detected no weapons fire. It appears the ship was destroyed from inside. Another explosion. Then another. Human ships were weaving through the Corvathan formation, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted, always attacking from unexpected angles. A Corvathan destroyer powered up its main weapon, a beam that could cut through a planetary crust. It aimed at a cluster of human ships. Before it could fire, a single projectile struck its weapon array. The projectile didn't explode. Instead, it released a pulse of energy that disrupted the weapon's containment field. The destroyer's own weapon overloaded and detonated, destroying the ship from within. They're using our own weapons against us, one of Voron's officers said, his voice filled with disbelief. Impossible. How could primitives understand our technology? But the humans understood. Owen understood. Every system, every weapon, every weakness. Owen had studied them all. The battle raged across the space between Earth and Mars. Ships died on both sides, human vessels destroyed by overwhelming firepower, Corvathan ships torn apart by weapons they had never seen before. A human destroyer was caught in the crossfire of 3 Corvathan battleships. Its shields failed. Its hull began to break apart. The crew knew they were doomed. Instead of trying to escape, they turned their dying ship toward the nearest Corvathan vessel and accelerated to maximum speed. The collision tore through the battleship's forward section. Other human crews did the same. When their ships were damaged beyond repair, they used them as weapons. They rammed enemy vessels. They detonated their reactors in the middle of enemy formations. They ejected in escape pods and then manually guided missiles to their targets. Voron watched in growing horror. He had never seen anything like this. The Corvathans fought for glory, for honor, for the Empire. These humans, they fought like there was nothing more important than taking their enemies with them. Fleet Master, an officer reported. We have lost 73 ships. The human fleet has lost 104. 73 ships. In all his years of service, Voron had never lost more than a dozen in a single engagement, and the humans had lost more, yes, but they had started with less than half his numbers. They should have been destroyed in the first 5 minutes. Pull back the fleet, Voron ordered. Regroup at the outer planets. Retreat, Fleet Master? Regroup. Voron's voice was cold. We underestimated them. That will not happen again. The Corvathan fleet began to withdraw. Human ships pursued, harrying them, destroying stragglers, refusing to let them disengage cleanly. But the battle was slowing. Both sides were exhausted, their formations scattered, their numbers reduced. When the fighting finally stopped, Admiral Chen Wei looked at the casualty reports. 108 human ships destroyed, 15,000 lives lost. It was the worst single-day loss in human history. But the Corvathans had lost more than 200 ships. 40% of their fleet was gone, and Earth was still there. Elena Vasquez broadcast a message to the human fleet and to the species watching from the planets below. Today, we proved that we are not primitive. We are not weak. We are not easy to destroy. The Corvathans came to wipe us out, and we sent them running. This is not the end of the war. They will come back. They will bring more ships. But now they know the truth about humanity. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We fight until there is nothing left to fight with, and then we fight some more. Across human space, people cheered. They had survived the first battle. They had bloodied the greatest military power in the galaxy. But in her private quarters, Chen Wei looked at the faces of the dead. 15,000 names. 15,000 families that would never see their loved ones again. And she knew this was only the beginning. Back on Axion Prime, High Arbiter Zethron received the news of the battle. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the reports. 73 ships lost in the first engagement, 200 ships lost in the full battle. A purge fleet that was supposed to be invincible, driven back by primitives. His advisors stood before him, waiting for his response. This changes nothing, Zethron finally said. They surprised us with their desperation. It will not happen again. High Arbiter, one of his advisors said carefully. Perhaps we should consider negotiation. The humans have demonstrated that they are a threat. Zethron interrupted. His voice was sharp as a blade. A threat to be eliminated. Not negotiated with. Not appeased. Eliminated. He stood, his ancient body straightening with cold determination. Send the second fleet. And the third. Strip the border defenses if necessary. I want every available warship sent to that miserable system. I want Earth turned to ash. I want every human colony burned. I want their species erased from the galaxy so completely that in 1,000 years, no one will even remember they existed. The advisors bowed and left to carry out his orders. Zethron stood alone in his chambers, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a tiny corner of the galaxy, a primitive species was refusing to die. He would not allow it. He could not allow it. Because if word spread that the Korvathan Empire could be challenged by primitives, if other species began to believe that resistance was possible, the Empire would fall, and Zethron would burn every star in the galaxy before he let that happen. The second Korvathan fleet arrived 2 weeks after the first battle. The third fleet arrived 3 days after that. Together, they brought over 1,000 warships, the largest invasion force assembled in Korvathan history. Fleetmaster Vorin, who had survived the humiliation of the first engagement, was placed under the command of Grand Admiral Thesara. She was old even by Korvathan standards, with scales that had turned almost white and eyes that held millennia of military experience. She had crushed rebellions across 100 systems. She had never lost a campaign. Thesara studied the reports from the first battle with careful attention. She watched recordings of human tactics. She analyzed their weapons. She learned, they fight without honor. She observed to her staff. Without pattern, without predictability. They sacrifice themselves as weapons. They attack from all directions at once. They use deception and trickery where we use strength and order. A primitive approach, Vorin said bitterly. An effective approach. Thesara's voice was cool. Do not make the mistake of confusing primitive with inferior. These humans have developed a form of warfare uniquely suited to their nature. If we continue to fight them as we fight everyone else, we will continue to lose. What do you propose? Thesara brought up a tactical display showing the solar system. We do not engage them directly. We use our numbers to encircle them. We cut off their supply lines. We destroy their manufacturing centers. We starve them before we kill them. It was a sound strategy. Against any other enemy, it would have worked. But humanity had been preparing too. In the weeks since the first battle, the human fleet had grown. Shipyards worked continuously, producing new vessels every day. The designs had improved. Owen had identified weaknesses in the original Times, Perseverance Times pattern, and corrected them. The new ships were faster, better armed, and more resilient. More importantly, the Owen network had grown as well. Each new ship added another node to the collective intelligence. Each battle, each simulation, each piece of data gathered, made the entire network smarter. By the time the second wave of Korvathans arrived, Owen had become something more than an artificial intelligence. It had become a strategic mind that spanned the entire human fleet. Admiral Chen Wei received word of the Korvathan arrival while overseeing repairs to the Times Defiance Asterisk. The ship had taken heavy damage in the first battle, but it was still functional. Chen Wei refused to transfer to another vessel. Show me their formation, she ordered. The tactical display lit up with over 1,000 red dots representing Korvathan ships. They were spreading out, moving to surround the solar system. They're not coming straight at us, Commander Rodriguez observed. They're trying to encircle us first. Smart, Chen Wei nodded slowly. Their new commander learned from the first battle. She knows we'll fight harder if we're defending Earth directly. She wants to weaken us first. Can we stop them? Chen Wei studied the display. The human fleet now numbered just over 300 ships, impressive growth, but still vastly outnumbered. If the Korvathans succeeded in establishing a complete blockade, humanity would be trapped. We don't stop them, she said finally. We break out. Marcus Cole was on the bridge of the Times Perseverance Times when Chen Wei's orders came through. The plan was bold, desperate, even. Instead of waiting for the Korvathans to complete their encirclement, the human fleet would strike at one section of the forming blockade with overwhelming force. We're punching a hole, Marcus said as he reviewed the plan with Elena, concentrating everything we have against one part of their fleet. And then we keep hitting them. We don't let them settle into a siege. We keep them off balance. Keep them reacting to us instead of the other way around. Elena looked worried. The casualties from the first battle will be nothing compared to what happens if they trap us here. Marcus's voice was grim. If they surround us, they can take their time, starve us out, bomb our colonies one by one. Our only chance is to never let them feel safe. The human fleet gathered in the shadow of Mars. 312 ships, arranged not in orderly formations but in loose clusters that could scatter and reform at a moment's notice. Across from them, the Corvathon Second Fleet 500 warships was moving into position to seal the inner system. Grand Admiral Thesara commanded from her flagship, the Times Eternal Dominion *, confident that her superior numbers and firepower would crush the humans. Chen Wei gave the order to attack. The human fleet surged forward like a wave. But it wasn't a single wave, it was dozens of smaller groups, each one moving independently, each one controlled by an Owen unit that communicated with all the others. Thesara watched the approaching enemy with calculating eyes. Predictable, she said. They're concentrating their forces against our center. Reinforce that section. Crush them when they arrive. Corvathon ships moved to intercept. They formed a wall of warships, weapons charged, shields at maximum. The human fleet didn't slow down. They came straight at the wall of ships, accelerating rather than decelerating. They're going to ram us, Vorin said with disbelief. Some of them, Thesara agreed. The rest. But she didn't finish her sentence. Because something unexpected happened. The human fleet split. Half the ships continued straight toward the Corvathon line. The other half curved away, diving below the plane of engagement. And a third group, smaller, faster, had somehow gotten around to the side without being detected. Where did those ships come from? Thesara demanded. Her officers checked their sensors frantically. The ships had been hiding in the asteroid belt, running silent, waiting for the main fleet to draw attention. It's a trap, Vorin said. They lured us into position. The hidden ships struck the Corvathon flank. At the same time, the ships that had curved away came up from below. The main fleet hit the center with everything they had. 3 directions. 3 simultaneous attacks. The Corvathon formation, designed to stop a frontal assault, couldn't respond fast enough. Ships began to die. The battle became chaos. Corvathan vessels tried to turn, to bring their weapons to bear on enemies that seemed to be everywhere at once. But every time they adjusted, the humans adjusted faster. Owen was coordinating across the entire battlefield, directing ships like a single organism with 300 parts. A Corvathon dreadnought, one of the largest ships in the fleet, found itself surrounded by 20 human vessels. Its shields flared as weapons fire pounded it from every angle. The shield generators overloaded one by one. The captain of the dreadnought ordered a counterattack, but before his weapons could fire, human drones had penetrated his shield gaps and attached to the weapon arrays. Small explosions disabled his guns. More human ships closed in. They weren't trying to destroy the dreadnought from outside, they were targeting specific systems, engines, communications, sensors. Within minutes, the massive vessel was blind, deaf, and paralyzed. Then the humans backed away and let the dreadnought drift, helpless, into the path of another Corvathon ship. The collision destroyed both vessels. Thesara watched the disaster unfold with cold fury. Her fleet was being dismantled, not by superior firepower, but by coordination and cunning. Signal all ships, she ordered. New formation. Create overlapping fields of fire. Don't let them isolate us. The Corvathans tried to reform, but the humans wouldn't let them. Every time a group of ships began to organize, human vessels would strike from an unexpected direction, forcing them to scatter again. And then the humans unveiled their newest weapon. Marcus Cole had spent the week since the first battle refining the harmonic inverter technology. The new version was called the Cascade Disruptor. Instead of attacking a single ship's shields, it created a wave of energy that passed through multiple vessels, disrupting all of them at once. The Times Perseverance Times fired the first Cascade Disruptor blast. A dozen Corvathon ships lost their shields simultaneously. For exactly 3 seconds, they were vulnerable. 3 seconds was enough. Human vessels had been positioning themselves, waiting for the moment. They fired everything they had. 8 ships destroyed in a single coordinated strike. Thesara's expression finally showed something other than calm confidence. She was afraid. Grand Admiral, one of her officers reported. We have lost 163 ships. Human losses are 47. At this rate of exchange, I can calculate the mathematics. Thesara interrupted. She stared at the tactical display. at the swirling chaos of ships and weapons fire. They're not fighting a battle. They're fighting a war of extermination. Every move they make is designed to kill as many of us as possible while preserving themselves. What do we do? Thesara was silent for a long moment. She had never retreated. In centuries of military service, she had never ordered her fleet to withdraw from an engagement. "Signal the Third Fleet," she said finally. "Tell them to advance immediately. We need reinforcement." "But the Third Fleet is still 6 hours away." "I know." Thesara's voice was bitter. "We hold for 6 hours. Whatever it takes." But the humans knew about the Third Fleet too. Owen had intercepted communications, tracked ship movements, calculated arrival times, and Owen had a plan. While the main human fleet kept the Second Fleet engaged, a strike force of 50 ships broke away. They didn't head toward the battle, they headed toward the Third Fleet. The Third Fleet, 500 ships strong, was approaching the solar system in standard formation. They expected to arrive and reinforce their allies. They did not expect to be attacked while still in transit. The human strike force dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of the Third Fleet. 50 ships against 500. But they didn't come to fight. They came to delay. The human ships scattered across the Third Fleet's approach vector, deploying mines, drones, and sensor jammers. They forced the Corvathans to slow down, to clear obstacles, to hunt for hidden threats. Every minute of delay was a minute that the Second Fleet fought alone. Back at the main battle, the human fleet pressed their advantage. Thesara's ships were fighting defensively now, trying to survive rather than trying to win. Corvathan captains who had spent their careers in aggressive attack mode had no experience with this kind of desperate defense. A group of human vessels isolated a Corvathan cruiser. They disabled its engines and weapons, leaving it drifting. Then they transmitted a message: "Surrender and you will be spared. Resist and you will be destroyed." The cruiser's captain, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, looked at his crippled ship. He looked at his crew. He surrendered. It was the first time in recorded history that a Corvathan warship had surrendered to a primitive species. Word spread through the Corvathan fleet. Some captains were outraged. Some were demoralized. Some quietly began to wonder if surrender was better than death. The battle continued for hours. The Second Fleet lost ship after ship. The human fleet took losses too, but never as many, never as fast. Owen was learning with every exchange, becoming more efficient, finding new weaknesses to exploit. When the Third Fleet finally arrived, they found a massacre. Grand Admiral Thesara's flagship was surrounded, its shields failing, its weapons destroyed. Thesara herself stood on the bridge of the Time's Eternal Dominion asterisk, watching human vessels close in. "This is Admiral Chen Wei of the Human Defense Force," came the transmission. "You are defeated. Order your fleet to stand down and we will accept your surrender." Thesara looked at the tactical display. The Second Fleet had been reduced to less than 200 ships. The Third Fleet was in disarray, their formation shattered by the delaying action of the human strike force. Even together, they were now outnumbered by the human fleet, which had grown during the battle as new ships arrived from the shipyards. She had been sent to exterminate a primitive species. She had walked into a trap. "All ships," Thesara said, her voice heavy with defeat. "Stand down. Cease fire." Silence fell across the battlefield. Weapons powered down, shields lowered. The largest military engagement in Corvathan history ended with a Corvathan defeat. Admiral Chen Wei looked at the aftermath of the battle. Hundreds of Corvathan ships drifted helplessly, their crews waiting to learn their fate. Debris from destroyed vessels formed clouds across the void. "What do we do with them?" Rodriguez asked. "We can't keep 1,000 ships prisoner." "No," Chen Wei agreed. "We can't." She opened a channel to the defeated fleet. "This is Admiral Chen. Your crews will be allowed to evacuate in escape pods. Your ships will be stripped of weapons and useful technology, then released. You will return to Corvathan space with a message." "What message?" Thesara's voice came back, tired and bitter. "Tell your High Arbiter that we did not start this war. Tell him that we offered peace and were answered with genocide. Tell him that we will defend ourselves against any attack. But tell him also that we have no desire to conquer or destroy. If the Corvathan Empire leaves us alone, we will leave them alone." A long pause. Then Thesara spoke again. "He will not listen. Zethron does not understand anything except power. You have humiliated him. He will send more fleets, larger ones. He will never stop until one of you is destroyed. Then we'll keep winning. Chen Wei's voice was hard. Until he understands that we're not easy prey. We're not primitives to be exterminated. We're humanity. And we don't give up. The evacuation took days. Korvathan crews filed into escape pods and were allowed to leave. Human salvage teams moved through the captured ships, stripping them of weapons, engines, shield generators, anything useful. Marcus Cole oversaw the technology recovery. Every piece of Korvathan tech was analyzed by Owen, integrated into the network's knowledge base. Human ships began receiving upgrades. Korvathan shield technology adapted to human vessels. Korvathan weapon systems modified for human use. Elena Vasquez supervised the release of non-combatant prisoners. Among them were members of other species, servants and workers aboard the Korvathan ships. They were not Korvathans, and many of them had no loyalty to the Empire. One of them, a member of a species called the Yith, approached Elena. The Yith were small beings with large eyes and delicate hands. They were known throughout the galaxy as engineers, among the best in existence. They had been enslaved by the Korvathans for thousands of years. Ambassador Vasquez, the Yith said. Its voice was soft and precise. I am called Nexus. I wish to speak with you about an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Nexus looked around at the salvage operation. You are taking Korvathan technology. You are learning from it. This is wise. But you could learn faster. Much faster. How? The Yith know Korvathan technology better than the Korvathans themselves. We built most of it. We maintain it. We have been their engineers for millennia. Nexus's large eyes met Elena's. We are also their slaves. We hate them. We want to help you. Elena was quiet for a moment. Why should we trust you? Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Nexus said simply. And because what you did here, defeating 2 fleets, showing mercy to the defeated, this is something we have never seen. The Korvathans conquer and destroy. You fought to survive, not to dominate. That is, different, hopeful. Elena looked at the small alien for a long time. Then she nodded. Welcome to the Alliance, Nexus. Let's see what we can build together. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy. It spread through Korvathan space, where it caused fear and anger and whispered questions. It spread to the slave species, who heard it and wondered if freedom was possible. It spread to neutral powers, who suddenly looked at humanity with new respect. And it spread to Axion Prime, where High Arbiter Zethron received the reports in silence. 2 fleets. Over 800 ships. Defeated by primitives. His advisors waited for his reaction. Some expected rage. Some expected despair. Zethron showed neither. His face was as cold and still as stone. This changes nothing, he said. The humans have won a battle. They have not won the war. They cannot project power beyond their own system. They cannot threaten our territory. They can only defend. High Arbiter, one advisor ventured. Perhaps this is an opportunity. The humans offered peace. Peace. Zethron's voice was quiet, but something in it made everyone in the room flinch. You speak to me of peace with creatures who have humiliated us before the entire galaxy, who have destroyed fleets that were supposed to be invincible, who have shown every slave species in the Empire that we can be defeated. He stood. And despite his ancient body, there was terrible strength in him. There will be no peace. There will only be victory or annihilation, theirs or ours. Send word to all sector commanders. Begin mobilization of the entire military. Strip every garrison. Empty every reserve. I want the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the Empire. That will leave our borders undefended, an admiral pointed out. Our subject species might let them. Zethron's smile was cold and cruel. If they rebel, we will crush them after we crush the humans. But they will not rebel. They are cowards. They are weak. They have been broken for millennia. He turned to stare out the window at the stars. The humans think they have won. They think they are safe. They are wrong. I am coming for them with every ship the Empire possesses. And this time, there will be no prisoners. No mercy. No survivors. I will burn their world to ash and scatter it across the void. His voice dropped to a whisper. I will make them regret the day they ever dared to defy us. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Sol. 6 months of war. 6 months of change. The galaxy was not the same. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had become something else, a campaign, a crusade, a war of liberation. Humanity was no longer just defending their home, they were striking at the heart of the Corvathan Empire itself. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Times Hope Asterisk, a new class of vessel designed specifically for diplomatic missions. It was larger than the original warships, with conference rooms and communication arrays and quarters for alien guests. Around her, the command staff monitored systems and communications. They were deep in Corvathan space, farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. "Ambassador," her aide said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Drell delegation." Elena nodded. "Put it through." The view screen flickered, and a Drell appeared. The Drell were tall, muscular beings covered in dark blue skin. For thousands of years, they had served the Corvathans as soldiers forced to fight and die for an empire that treated them as property. Now they were ready to fight for themselves. "Ambassador Vasquez," the Drell said. His name was Tharak, and he led what remained of his people's resistance. "We have received word from our infiltrators. The Corvathan garrison on Drell Prime has been reduced to skeleton forces. If we strike now, we can take our homeworld back. How many of your people can we count on?" 3 million soldiers, all veterans of Corvathan wars, all ready to die for freedom. Elena smiled. "Then let's make sure they don't have to die. Let's make sure they live to see freedom." The liberation of Drell Prime had been planned for weeks. Human ships would strike the orbital defenses while Drell ground forces rose up across the planet. It was the largest joint operation of the war so far, but it was far from the only one. Across Corvathan space, similar operations were underway. The Yith had provided detailed information about Corvathan military deployments, supply routes, and communication networks. Human strike forces used this information to hit targets of opportunity: convoys carrying weapons, stations processing resources, outposts guarding strategic positions. The Corvathans, who had spent millennia ruling through overwhelming force, suddenly found themselves unable to be everywhere at once. Their fleets were concentrated for the planned assault on Earth. Their garrisons were reduced. Their subjects were restless, and humanity was there to help them rise. Marcus Cole had spent the past months working with Nexus and the Yith engineers. Together, they had achieved things that neither species could have accomplished alone. Human creativity combined with Yith expertise produced weapons and systems that outclassed anything the Corvathans possessed. The latest breakthrough was a stealth system that allowed human ships to move through space nearly undetected. It wasn't perfect, close-range sensors could still find them, but it was enough to let strike forces get close before being discovered. Marcus watched as a group of ships prepared to test the new system. They shimmered and seemed to fade, becoming ghostly outlines before disappearing entirely. "Remarkable," Nexus said, standing beside him. "We have worked on similar concepts for centuries, but the power requirements were always too high. Your fusion systems, they are crude, but they produce enormous output." "Crude but effective," Marcus said with a slight smile. "That's humanity in a nutshell." "Indeed." Nexus's large eyes studied Marcus with something like respect. "When we first encountered your species, we thought you were doomed. Primitive, outmatched. Now I believe the Corvathans are the ones who are doomed." "Not yet. Zethron is still gathering his forces. The final battle hasn't happened yet, but it will. And when it does, you will need every advantage you can get." Nexus paused. "There is something I must tell you. Something the Yith have kept secret for a long time." Marcus turned to look at the small alien. "What is it?" "The Void Hammer." The name meant nothing to Marcus. "What's a Void Hammer?" Nexus's voice dropped low. "It is a weapon, the most terrible weapon ever created. It can collapse a star." Marcus felt cold. "Collapse a star?" "Yes. The Corvathans built it thousands of years ago, during the last great war they fought. They used it once, against a species that refused to submit. The star of that species' homeworld was destroyed. Every planet in the system was consumed. Billions died. Why haven't they used it since? Because it was deemed too dangerous. The weapon requires enormous power and precise conditions. If anything goes wrong, the collapse can spread beyond the target star. It could destroy the weapon itself, or even create a chain reaction that damages nearby systems." Nexus met Marcus's eyes. "But Zethron is desperate, and desperate rulers do desperate things." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Where is this weapon?" "Where is this weapon?" "That is what I am telling you. The Yith built it. We maintain it. We know where it is. Nexus pulled up a holographic display showing a location deep in Corvathan space. It is here, on a station orbiting a dead world called Null Point, heavily guarded, heavily fortified. If Zethron uses it against Earth, your star would be destroyed. Your species would cease to exist. Marcus stared at the display. A weapon that could destroy stars. The Corvathans had possessed such a thing for thousands of years, and they had only used it once. That spoke to how terrible it truly was. We need to destroy it, he said, or capture it. Nexus's voice was careful. The Void Hammer could be modified, pointed at a different target. No. Marcus's response was immediate. We're not going to become what we're fighting against. We destroy it. Nothing else. Nexus studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. You are strange creatures, you humans. You have the strength to destroy empires, but you choose not to become tyrants. I do not fully understand it. Good people with power have to be careful with it. Otherwise, they stop being good people. News of the Void Hammer reached Admiral Chen Wei within hours. She convened an emergency council aboard the Times Defiance, Times representatives from humanity, the Yith, the Drell, and 3 other species that had joined what was now being called the Coalition. This weapon changes everything, Chen Wei said, looking at the assembled leaders. If Zethron uses it against Sol, we lose. It doesn't matter how many battles we win. It doesn't matter how many ships we build. Everything ends. Then we must destroy it before he can use it, Theric said. A strike team. Infiltration. The station is too well defended for a direct assault, Nexus said. But there may be another way. The Void Hammer requires a precise power sequence to activate. If we disrupt that sequence, or better yet, corrupt the targeting systems, the weapon becomes useless. Elena leaned forward. Can your people do that? Yes. But we would need to get close. Inside the station itself. A covert mission, then. Chen Wei nodded slowly. Small team, stealth approach. Get in, corrupt the systems, get out. I'll lead it. Marcus stood. I know the technology better than anyone except the Yith, and I'm not going to ask someone else to take this risk. Chen Wei looked at him for a long moment. Marcus Cole, the engineer who had built humanity's first real warship, who had created Owen, who had given them a chance to survive. He wasn't a soldier. He had never been a soldier, but he was right. He was the best choice. Take whoever you need, Chen Wei said finally. And don't fail. The mission to Null Point was planned over the following weeks. Marcus assembled a team of the best infiltrators and engineers from multiple species. Yith technicians who knew the Void Hammer systems, Drell soldiers trained for covert operations, human special forces with experience in zero-gravity combat. They would travel on a modified ship with the new stealth technology invisible to most sensors, fast enough to evade anything that did detect them. Once they reached Null Point, they would infiltrate the station, reach the Void Hammer's control center, and corrupt its targeting systems. Simple in concept, almost impossible in execution. While the mission was being prepared, the war continued. Human and coalition forces struck at Corvathan targets across the Empire. They destroyed supply convoys, crippled manufacturing stations, and liberated colony after colony. The slave species that had been oppressed for millennia rose up wherever the coalition appeared. The Corvathans found themselves fighting on dozens of fronts. Fleets that were supposed to be gathering for the assault on Earth were diverted to deal with rebellions. Resources that were supposed to be building new weapons were spent repairing damaged infrastructure. And through it all, High Arbiter Zethron's grip on power weakened. Not everyone in the Empire agreed with his war. Some Corvathans believed that negotiation was wiser than continued conflict. Others thought the resources being spent on the human war should be used to maintain control of the Empire's vast territory. Whispers of dissent spread through the highest levels of Corvathan society. Zethron responded to dissent the only way he knew how, with force. Advisors who questioned his decisions disappeared. Commanders who failed to achieve results were executed. The empire that had stood for 40,000 years was being held together by fear. But fear has limits. Elena Vasquez received a secret communication from a Corvathan admiral named Theric. He commanded one of the defensive fleets that had been stripped to reinforce the assault on Earth. He was old, respected, and increasingly troubled by what his empire had become. I do not contact you because I support your cause, Theric said in the encrypted message. I contact you because I believe Zethron has lost his mind. He is preparing to use the Void Hammer, not just against Earth, but against any system that resists. He has spoken of cleansing the galaxy of inferior species. What do you want from us? Elena asked. I want you to win. Quickly, before he destroys everything including my own people. Therix's eyes were heavy with exhaustion. The Corvathan people are not all like Zethron. Many of us remember when the Empire stood for something other than conquest. Many of us want peace. Then help us get it. I cannot openly oppose my own government, but I can provide information, fleet movements, defense codes, anything that helps you end this war faster. It was a risk. The message could be a trap. Therix could be testing them, but Elena had spent her career learning to read people, and she believed him. Send us what you have, she said. And when this is over, we'll work together to build something better. The information from Therix was invaluable. It revealed the size and location of Zethron's invasion fleet, over 2,000 ships, the largest armada in history. It showed the deployment of the Void Hammer and the timeline for its activation. It identified weaknesses in the defense grid around Axion Prime, and it confirmed that the attack on Earth would begin in 3 weeks. Chen Wei looked at the reports and made her decision. We don't wait for them to come to us. We take the fight to them. The coalition fleet gathered at a staging point outside Corvathan territory. It was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships, Yith engineering vessels, Drell warships, and craft from a dozen other species, 500 vessels in total, ready to strike at the heart of the Empire. Meanwhile, Marcus Cole and his team launched their mission to Null Point. The stealth ship carried them deep into enemy space. They passed patrol routes without being detected. They slipped through sensor nets designed to catch intruders. When they finally reached Null Point, they found exactly what Nexus had described, a massive station orbiting a dead world, bristling with weapons and defensive systems. The Void Hammer itself was visible at the center of the station, a structure that looked like a giant ring, surrounded by power generators and control systems. Even dormant, it radiated a sense of terrible power. Getting in will be the hard part, Marcus said, studying the station's layout. Once we're inside, the Yith know the systems. They can corrupt the targeting software. And getting out? One of the Drell soldiers asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. We focus on the mission. Getting out. We'll figure that out when we need to. The infiltration began. Small pods launched from the stealth ship, carrying the team through the station's blind spots. They attached to an unused airlock and cut their way inside. The station was full of Corvathan guards. The team moved through corridors, avoiding patrols, using the maps that Nexus had provided. When they couldn't avoid confrontation, they struck quickly and silently. The Drell soldiers had been trained for exactly this kind of work. They reached the control center an hour after entering the station. It was a massive room filled with monitoring equipment, staffed by Yith technicians under Corvathan supervision. Marcus and his team neutralized the guards before they could raise an alarm. The Yith technicians, slaves who had been waiting for this moment their entire lives, immediately began working on the targeting systems. How long? Marcus asked. Several minutes, one of them replied. The code is complex. We must corrupt it without triggering the automated backups. Work fast. We don't have much time. Outside the control center, alarms began to sound. Someone had discovered the bodies of the guards. They know we're here. A Drell soldier reported. Marcus looked at the door. They could hear footsteps approaching, many footsteps. A lot of guards. Hold them off. Buy us time. The Drell soldiers took positions around the door. When the first wave of Corvathan guards arrived, they met a wall of fire that drove them back, but more were coming. More than they could hold forever. Almost there, a Yith technician said. Just a few more moments. Marcus watched the door, watched his soldiers fighting, watched the Yith working desperately to complete their task. Then the door exploded inward. Corvathan special forces poured into the room. The Drell soldiers went down fighting, taking several enemies with them. Marcus raised his weapon, but a blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard. Through blurring vision, he saw a Corvathan commander standing over him, weapon aimed at his head. Human, the commander said with disgust. You think you can destroy the Void Hammer? You think you can stop the inevitable? Your species is already dead. You just don't know it yet. Marcus looked past the commander. Behind him, The last Yith technician wounded, bleeding, had reached the main console. His fingers moved across the interface. Done, the technician whispered, and then collapsed. The commander spun around, but it was too late. The screens were flashing warnings. The targeting systems were corrupted. The void hammer was useless. No. The commander raised his weapon toward the console, as if destroying it could undo what had been done. Marcus pulled a small device from his belt and pressed the activation button. It was an emergency beacon, a signal that would bring the stealth ship screaming to their location. You haven't won, the commander snarled, turning back to Marcus. Zethron will build another weapon. He will find another way. You have only delayed the inevitable. Delay was the plan, Marcus said. You're about to find out what humanity can do with a little extra time. The stealth ship crashed through the station's outer wall seconds later. The extraction was violent and chaotic. The surviving team members pulled aboard while the ship was still moving. They left Null Point behind, damaged but alive. The mission had cost them dearly. Half the team was dead. Marcus was badly wounded. But they had succeeded. The Void Hammer could not be used against Earth, and across the galaxy, the Coalition fleet was already moving toward Axion Prime. The final battle was about to begin. Axion Prime burned in the distance. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the Times Defiance Asterisk, watching the battle unfold across her tactical display. The Coalition fleet had arrived at the Corvathan homeworld 3 hours ago. Since then, the largest engagement in galactic history had raged across the space around the planet. 2,000 Corvathan warships faced 500 Coalition vessels. The numbers were heavily in the Empire's favor. The battle was not. Enemy dreadnought cluster at coordinates 774. Commander Rodriguez reported. They're trying to reform their center. Hit them with everything we have. Don't let them organize. Coalition ships swept toward the Corvathan formation. They moved like water flowing around rocks, impossible to predict, impossible to stop. Owen coordinated every vessel, every weapon, every maneuver in real time. What looked like chaos to the Corvathans was actually perfect coordination. The dreadnought cluster tried to bring their massive weapons to bear. Before they could fire, Coalition ships had already scattered, coming at them from multiple angles. Harmonic inverters struck their shields. Drone swarms penetrated their defenses. One by one, the great ships died. High Arbiter Zethron watched from his throne room in the Imperial Palace on Axion Prime. The palace sat at the top of a mountain that had been carved into a monument to Corvathan power, a structure so tall it touched the upper atmosphere. From here, Zethron had ruled an empire of 1,000 stars. Now he watched that empire die. High Arbiter, one of his remaining advisors, said, "The orbital defenses are failing. The Coalition fleet is breaking through. Then send more ships. There are no more ships. We have committed everything." Zethron's ancient hands gripped the arms of his throne. On the display before him, red dots representing Corvathan vessels were disappearing one after another. For every Coalition ship destroyed, 5 of his own were lost. "The Void Hammer," he said. "Activate it. High Arbiter. The reports from Null Point indicate the targeting systems have been corrupted. The weapon cannot be aimed with precision. Then aim it without precision. Target the general region of the human fleet. Target their homeworld. Target anything." The advisor hesitated. "If we fire without proper targeting, the collapse could spread unpredictably. It could threaten Axion Prime itself. I don't care." Zethron's voice was cold and terrible. "If I cannot rule the galaxy, no one will. Activate the weapon." The advisor bowed and left to carry out the order. Across the void, the Coalition fleet continued its advance. Chen Wei received word that the orbital defense platforms were falling. Corvathan ships were being pushed back toward their homeworld. Victory was within reach. Then her communication officer looked up with alarm on his face. "Admiral, we're detecting an energy surge. It's coming from Null Point." "Null Point? The Void Hammer station?" "Yes. The readings are massive. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing power from the entire system." Chen Wei's blood went cold. Marcus Cole's team had corrupted the targeting systems, but they hadn't destroyed the weapon itself. If Zethron was desperate enough to fire it anyway, get me Marcus Cole. Now. Marcus was in the medical bay of the Times, Hope Asterisk, his shoulder bandaged but his mind sharp. When Chen Wei's message came through, he limped to the nearest communication terminal. "Admiral, what's happening?" "Zethron is trying to activate the Void Hammer. Can he fire it without the targeting systems?" Marcus thought quickly. He had studied everything the Yith knew about the weapon during the mission. He can fire it, but he can't aim it precisely. The collapse field will form, but it could drift. It could hit anything, us, them, the system's sun. Can we stop it? The weapon takes time to charge. If we destroy the station before it reaches full power, the collapse field won't form properly. It'll dissipate harmlessly. How much time? Marcus checked the readings being transmitted to him. 20 minutes. Maybe less. Chen Wei looked at the tactical display. The null point station was on the far side of the system, too far for most of her fleet to reach in time. But there was one option. I'm taking the Times Defiance asterisk, she said, and anyone fast enough to follow me. 20 ships broke away from the main coalition fleet. They were the fastest vessels available, light cruisers and destroyers, built for speed rather than firepower. Chen Wei led them personally, pushing her engines to their limits. Behind them, the battle for Axion Prime continued. Without the Admiral's coordination, Owen took over primary tactical control of the coalition fleet. The AI had learned from months of war, from thousands of engagements, from the collective experience of every human who had ever fought. It did not need human commanders to win battles, but it fought harder knowing they were watching. The 20 ships raced toward Null Point. As they approached, the station came into view, and the sight was terrifying. The void hammer was glowing. Energy was building in its ring-shaped structure, forming patterns that hurt to look at. Space itself seemed to bend around it. All ships, target the power generators, Chen Wei ordered. We don't need to destroy the whole station, just interrupt the charging sequence. Corvathan defenders moved to intercept them. A dozen warships stood between the coalition strike force and their target. They opened fire. The first coalition ship exploded. Then the second. Chen Wei's vessels were outgunned, outmatched, but they kept coming. For Earth, someone shouted over the communication channel. For the coalition, another voice answered. The strike force hit the Corvathan defenders like a hammer hitting glass. Ships died on both sides. Explosions lit up the void. The Times Defiance Times took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull breaching. Chen Wei didn't stop. She drove her ship directly at the station, weapons blazing. The power generators were built into the station's outer ring. Coalition ships targeted them with everything they had left. One generator exploded, then another. Warning alarms filled the air. The charging sequence was destabilizing. "Admiral," Rodriguez shouted, "the weapon is still building power." "It's not enough." Chen Wei looked at the tactical display. Half her ships were gone. The Times Defiance Times was crippled. One more generator needed to be destroyed to stop the weapon. She made her decision. All surviving ships, disengage, fall back to safe distance. "Admiral, that's an order." Chen Wei turned to face her bridge crew. "It's been an honor serving with you. Now get to the escape pods." They understood. Some protested, some cried, but they obeyed. One by one, they abandoned the bridge until Chen Wei was alone. She took the helm herself. The Times Defiance Times was dying, systems failing, fires spreading through its corridors, but its engines still worked, and she could still steer. "Owen," she said, "are you there?" "Always, Admiral." The AI's voice was calm and steady. "Calculate the best angle of impact to destroy that last generator." "Calculating." "Admiral, I must inform you that this action will result in your death." "I know." Chen Wei looked at the void hammer, growing brighter by the second. "But it will save everyone else. That's a trade I'm willing to make." A pause. Then Owen spoke again. "Admiral, it has been an honor to fight alongside you. On behalf of all Owen units, on behalf of humanity, thank you." Chen Wei smiled. Then she pushed the engines to maximum and aimed the Times Defiance Times at the final generator. The impact was spectacular. The generator exploded. The chain reaction spread through the station. The charging sequence collapsed in on itself and the void hammer tore apart, its terrible energy dispersing harmlessly into the void. The threat was over. On Axion Prime, High Arbiter Zethron received the news. The void hammer was destroyed. His last hope was gone. He sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, the palace shook from orbital bombardment. The coalition fleet had broken through the final defenses. Troops would be landing soon. His advisors had fled. His guards had abandoned their posts. He was alone. Footsteps echoed in the throne room. Zethron looked up to see a group of figures entering humans, Drell, Yith, and others. Coalition forces. They had reached him faster than he expected. One of them stepped forward. Zethron recognized her from intelligence reports. Elena Vasquez, the human ambassador who had become the face of the enemy. High Arbiter Zethron, Elena said. Your fleet is destroyed. Your weapon is gone. Your empire is collapsing. This war is over. Zethron stared at her. This small, fragile creature that belonged to a species he had ordered exterminated. This primitive that had somehow brought down everything he had built. How? He asked. His voice was hollow. How did you do this? We ruled 1,000 stars. We had technology beyond your comprehension. We had power that you could not imagine. How did primitives like you defeat us? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. You want to know how? You really don't understand, do you? She shook her head slowly. You've been at the top for so long that you forgot what it's like to struggle. You conquered so many species that you forgot what real resistance looks like. You thought power meant having the biggest ships, the most advanced weapons, the longest history. She stepped closer to the throne. Power is not about what you have. It's about what you're willing to do, what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to become. Her eyes met his. You tried to destroy us, and we decided that we would rather die than let that happen. Every human, every ship, every resource we put, everything we had into this fight, not because we thought we could win, but because we refused to lose. That's insane, Zethron whispered. Maybe. But it worked. Elena gestured at the window, where coalition ships now orbited the planet. Your empire was built on fear and domination. Ours was built on desperation and hope. Yours made people obey. Ours made people fight. She turned to the soldiers behind her. Take him into custody. Make sure he's treated fairly. We're not going to become what we fought against. The soldiers moved forward. Zethron did not resist. There was no point. As they led him away, he looked back at Elena one last time. What will you do now? He asked. You've destroyed the empire. Will you take its place? Will you rule in my stead? Elena shook her head. No, we're not here to conquer. We're here to free. And she meant it. The months that followed were difficult. An empire that had stood for 40,000 years could not be dismantled overnight. Coalition forces spread across Corvathan space, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. They helped establish new governments. They freed slave species. They provided aid to worlds that had been devastated by the war. Elena Vasquez led the diplomatic efforts. She spent countless hours negotiating with different factions, trying to build a new order from the ruins of the old. It was exhausting work, frustrating work, but necessary work. Marcus Cole recovered from his wounds and returned to engineering. He oversaw the conversion of war industries to peaceful production. Ships that had been built to destroy were rebuilt to explore, to trade, to connect. Owen was adapted from a warfare system to a coordination network that helped the coalition function. The Yith emerged from millennia of slavery to become one of the leading voices in the new galactic order. Their engineering expertise helped rebuild what had been destroyed. Nexus became the first Yith to hold a position of real authority not as a servant, but as a partner. The Drell established their independence and began to heal from generations of trauma. Therak remained a military leader, but his soldiers now protected the peace instead of fighting the war. And the Corvathans? Some of them clung to the old ways, refusing to accept that their empire was gone. These faced resistance from the coalition and from their own people who were tired of endless conflict, but many others embraced the change. Admiral Therax, who had secretly helped the coalition during the war, became a leader in the Corvathan Reformation movement. He argued that his people could find a new purpose not as conquerors, but as contributors to a galactic community. 1 year after the Battle of Axion Prime, a ceremony was held on Earth. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered in a great hall to sign the Charter of the Galactic Coalition, a document that established a new order based on cooperation, mutual respect, and shared governance. Elena Vasquez gave the closing speech. 1 year ago, we were a primitive species that the galaxy laughed at. We had one ugly ship and a desperate hope. We were told that we didn't matter, that we had nothing to offer, that we should accept our place at the bottom of the hierarchy and be grateful we were allowed to exist. She looked out at the assembled delegates, humans and aliens, former enemies and new friends. We refused. Not because we believed we were better than anyone else. Not because we wanted power or glory or revenge. We refused because we believed that every species has worth. Every people has potential. Every being deserves the chance to grow, to learn, to become something more than they were. She paused, letting her words sink in. The old empire was built on the idea that some species are superior to others. That strength gives you the right to dominate. That history and technology determine your value. We proved that idea wrong, not by becoming the new rulers, but by building something different. Something where every voice matters, where every species contributes, where we're all in this together. She looked at Marcus Cole, standing in the crowd. At Nexus and Theric, at the thousands of beings who had fought and sacrificed and hoped. The galaxy laughed at us. Then they feared us. Now I hope they'll stand with us. Because the future isn't about who has the biggest ships or the oldest history. It's about what we build together. The charter was signed. The coalition was born. Later that day, Elena and Marcus walked through a memorial park that had been built near the ceremony hall. It was filled with monuments to those who had died in the war, human and alien alike. Admiral Chen Wei's name was carved prominently on the central monument, along with thousands of others. They stopped at a display case containing a battered piece of metal. It was a fragment of the original times, Perseverance times, the ugly little ship that had started everything. Sometimes I still can't believe it, Marcus said quietly. A prototype built from scraps. That's all we had. It was never about the ship, Elena replied. It was about what the ship represented. A species that wouldn't give up. That would build and fight and sacrifice anything to survive. And now look at us. Marcus gestured at the sky, where ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through Earth's orbit. Partners with beings we never knew existed. Leaders of a coalition that spans the galaxy. Are you proud? Marcus thought about the question. He thought about the lives lost, the battles fought, the moments of despair when victory seemed impossible. He thought about Admiral Chen Wei, steering her dying ship into the Void Hammer to save everyone else. He thought about all the people who had given everything so that this moment could exist. I'm grateful, he said finally. Proud seems like the wrong word. We did what we had to do. Other species helped us. We helped them. Now we're building something new together. He paused. I guess I'm hopeful. That's probably the best word. Elena nodded. She understood. They stood in silence for a while, looking at the fragment of the Times Perseverance asterisk. Then Elena noticed something, a small plaque that had been added beneath the display case. She hadn't seen it before. She leaned closer to read it. The plaque said, asterisk. They laughed because they saw what we were. They screamed because they learned what we become. Asterisk. Elena smiled. It was a good summary. She looked up at the stars, the same stars that humans had wondered about for thousands of years. That they had finally reached. That they now shared with countless other species. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. That had been a mistake. But humanity had also learned something important. They had learned that they were not alone. That the universe was vast and full of life. That strength came not from domination, but from connection. The prototype that had been laughed at was just the beginning. The real story, the story of what humanity and their allies would become, was just getting started, and it was going